Snow fell like silent knives from the sky, cold and endless. The wind howled like a dying beast. Sharp and cruel, Valari wrapped her arms tighter around the small bundle in her arms. It was her child, barely breathing, barely warm, barely alive. She had nothing left, no food, no tools, no shelter, and now no clothes. Her boots had frozen days ago, the fabric stiff and torn. Her skin was cut from walking on ice. Her fingers were bleeding. But she did not stop. She could not stop. She was a mother, and her child still breathed. She found a small cave between two stones, just big enough for her and the boy. She placed him gently on the ground and looked at the black sky. She had only one choice left. Valari took off the last piece of her coat. It's the thickest cloth she owned. She broke a piece of metal from a fallen drone sharp, enough to scrape rock. Then she gathered small twigs, some dry moss, and lit a spark. The coat caught fire slowly, flames dancing in the darkness. The warmth made her cry, not for herself, but because her child shivered a little less. She sat next to the fire, bare now, her thin body shaking violently. Her skin burned from cold and smoke, but she did not move. She held her son close. Her own body heaved, the only thing left to give. "Just hold on," she whispered. "Just, little longer," but she knew they would not last the night. Far away, across the frozen hills, a small orange light blinked. It wasn't a star, it wasn't a machine. It was a torch. A human man named Cal was walking the trail. He had come to this icy world to study plants, but now he was lost in snow, in time, and in memory. He saw smoke, thin and dark, rising from the rocks ahead. At first he thought it was a crashed ship, but something felt off. He ran toward it, his boots crunching in the snow, breath fogging in front of his face. As he reached the cave, he slowed down, heart pounding. He stepped into the shadows. One he saw made him freeze. A woman alien, pale, curled around a tiny child. Her body was bare, skin red from cold and firelight. Her arms were wrapped tightly around the boy like she was trying to become a blanket. The fire was almost out, the last piece of cloth turning black. She looked up, eyes wide with fear, teeth chattering too hard to speak. Cal knelt down slowly and took off his coat. He placed it over her shoulders, then wrapped his own scarf around the child. The alien woman flinched, trying to protect her son. But she was too weak to fight. "I'm not here to hurt you," Cal said gently. "You'll both freeze out here." Valari didn't answer. She only stared, her lips cracked and blue. Her body leaned against the rock as if it could fall apart at any moment. The boy coughed, a soft wheeze escaping his lips. Cal lifted him carefully, wrapping him close to his chest. "I have a shelter not far," he said. "You can't stay here." Valari looked at the dying fire, then at her child, then finally at the human. She didn't trust him, but she didn't have a choice. She nodded once, slowly. Cal moved quickly, helping her stand. She nearly fell, but he held her up. She was light, too light. Her legs trembling with every step, but she followed, step by step, into the snow again. They walked through the cold together, one human, one alien mother, one child. He held the child tight. She held on to him. The storm screamed louder, but now they were not alone. They reached a hidden cabin in a small rock cleft, built from metal and heat stone. He opened the door and led them inside. Warmth hit them like a wave. Valari dropped to her knees, breathing hard, her hands still clinging to her child. Cal quickly lit the furnace and placed the boy on a soft mat. He brought water, wrapped blankets around both of them, and stared quietly. She watched him with tired eyes. She expected him to yell or demand something, but he didn't. He just sat down near the wall, silent, watching the fire grow strong again for the first time in days. Valari stopped shaking. Her son's breathing slowed, his face Relaxing in sleep, she looked at the man who had saved them and whispered, "Why?" Cal didn't answer at first. He only looked at her, then said, "Because someone once left me to die in the cold. I swore I'd never let that happen to anyone else." The wind cried outside. But inside the cabin, a new warmth had begun. A human, an alien mother, and a child fighting the cold together. Valari opened her eyes slowly. Warmth, soft and strange, wrapped around her body like a memory. The last thing she remembered was the burning cloth, the frozen wind, and the face of a human man. Now she was inside a room, not cold stone, but something built safe and warm. She looked beside her and saw her child still breathing. Cheeks no longer pale like snow, a thick blanket covered him, and a soft mat was beneath his head. Steam rose from a metal pot near the fire, filling the small shelter with the smell of herbs and food. Valari tried to sit up, but her body screamed with pain. Her arms were weak, her legs shaking, her skin covered with small blisters from fire and frost. She didn't understand why she was alive. Then the human returned. He stepped inside the shelter carrying dry wood and a pouch full of supplies. He looked at her and gave a small nod. Not speaking at first, she tensed, ready to protect her child. But he only placed the items near the fire and began working. "You're awake," he said softly, not looking at her too long. "That's good." Valari watched him move like someone who had done this many times before. He added herbs to the pot, stirred it gently, then brought over a cup made from heated stone. He knelt beside her and offered the cup. "It's just water with root oil," he said. "It'll help your throat." She stared at it, unsure. He didn't force her. Just placed the cup nearby and stood back. Her eyes never left him, confused and cautious. Kindness was something she didn't know anymore. After a long silence, she picked up the cup with shaking fingers. It burned slightly, but the warmth spread through her body like sunlight. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "Why? Help me." Cal paused, his face unreadable for a moment. He looked at her, then at the boy, who slept peacefully. "My name's Cal," he said. "I used to live on a mining colony where help never came. One winter, we ran out of heat. Stones, my little brother froze before my eyes." Valari blinked, surprised by the pain in his voice. "I swore I'd never let anyone else die cold," he said. "Not if I could stop it." She looked down, ashamed. She had burned her clothes just to keep her child warm. Now, this stranger had given her his shelter, his fire, his silence. She didn't know what to say. "I am Valari," she said slowly. "This is my son." Cal nodded again. "He's strong," he said. "He'll live." He walked to the other side of the shelter, giving her space. Valari pulled the blanket tighter around herself. Her body was healing slowly. But inside, she still felt broken as the fire crackled. She saw something she hadn't seen in days. Her son's tiny hand moving across the mat. Reaching for her, she leaned forward and took it gently, kissing it with cold lips. The boy stirred and opened his eyes. "Mama," he whispered. Valari smiled with tears in her eyes. She hadn't heard his voice in so long. Cal quietly placed a small bowl of hot stew near them. "Let him eat slowly," he said. "It's soft and warm, just right for him." Valari nodded, feeding her son small spoonfuls. Sira smiled after the first taste, then looked at Cal with curious eyes. "Is he safe?" The boy asked softly. "Yes," Valari replied. "He saved us." The human said nothing, only added more wood to the fire. He didn't ask for thanks, didn't demand anything. He just kept working, keeping them alive. Later, when her son slept again, Valari tried to stand. Cal helped her gently. Without touching too much, she leaned against the wall. Covering herself with a blanket, he offered her a long shirt from his supplies, soft and oversized. She looked at it, unsure. It's not much, Cal said, but it's better than. Cold Valari took it and turned her back, dressing carefully. When she turned around, she saw Cal looking away. Politely, thank you, she whispered. He just nodded. That night, snow fell again outside the shelter, but inside, the warmth grew stronger, not just from fire, but from something deeper. Trust, slow and fragile, had begun to form. Valari sat close to her child, wrapped in the shirt and blanket. She watched Cal cook another pot of food, his movements calm and steady. The wind howled outside, but she no longer feared it. She asked, "Why are you alone here?" Cal stirred the pot before answering. "I came to study plants," he said, "looking for one that can survive the cold, but maybe I was meant to find something else." He looked at her for the first time, not as an alien, not as a burden, but as a mother, a fighter, a person. Valari didn't speak, but she felt it too. This man with fire, this quiet stranger, had saved more than her life. Valari stood quietly near the far wall of the shelter. The large shirt Cal had given her covered her body, but still, she felt naked underneath. It wasn't about the cloth. It was about everything she had lost: her home, her people, her dignity, her pride. And now, this kind human was seeing her at her lowest. The room was warm, the fire steady, her child safe and sleeping. But inside, Valari was still frozen. Frozen in fear, in shame, in the heavy weight of feeling like she didn't deserve this kindness. She walked toward a small reflective panel near the metal wall. It showed her face not as she once was, but as she now looked. Her skin was dry and cracked, her eyes sunken, her hair tangled and burned. She touched her cheek and felt the rough marks from cold and smoke. Then she looked down at her arms, at the scars forming from when she burned her clothes. Tears welled in her eyes again. Behind her, Cal was preparing food. He didn't stare, didn't speak, didn't treat her like someone broken. But Valari couldn't help feeling like she was. She turned away from the mirror and whispered, "I used to wear white silk. I had rings on every finger, and my hair flowed with silver beads." Now her voice shook. "I burned everything I had, just to keep my child breathing." Cal stopped stirring the pot. He looked over at her and said gently, "That's not weakness, Valari. That's what a real mother does." She didn't reply, just sat down on the floor beside her son. She looked at Cal and asked softly, "You don't think I'm dirty?" Cal didn't answer right away. He walked over, sat across from her, and said, "No one is dirty for surviving. You made a choice, no one else could." "I don't see filth, I see someone stronger than most soldiers I've ever met." Valari blinked, her throat closing up. No one had spoken to her like that in years, since the war, since the exile, since she had been cast out and left to wander the ice world. Her people had called her reckless for keeping the child. The child was weak, they said, and would only hold her back. But she had chosen him over the cold laws of their kind, and now, this human, this stranger, was telling her she was strong. Sira stirred and opened his eyes. He reached for her hand and smiled weakly. "Are we safe, Mama?" Valari kissed his forehead. "Yes, we're safe." Cal smiled softly and placed a bowl in front of them. "Soup again," he said. "But I added something special this time, snow root. It'll give him strength." Sira took the spoon slowly, tasting the hot liquid with closed eyes. Then he looked at Cal and smiled. "Thank you, human." Cal chuckled. "You can call me Cal." Sira nodded. "Thank you, Cal." Valari watched the two of them with a strange feeling in her chest. Something warm but unfamiliar. Something she thought she had lost a long time ago. Hope. Later that night, Valari sat beside the fire, brushing Sira's hair with her fingers. The boy was asleep again, resting peacefully for the first time in many moons. Cal was checking his tools near the back wall. Making notes in a small journal, Valari finally asked, "You said you came here to study plants. Yes, Cal replied. Cold-resistant ones, some might help on Earth, some might help others. But I didn't expect to find people. She nodded, understanding. There's not many of my kind here anymore, she said. They left, or died, or gave up. Cal looked at her and asked quietly, but not you? Valari looked down at her child. I couldn't, she said. If I die, he dies. And I promised I wouldn't let that happen. A long silence settled between them, but it wasn't cold. It was the kind of silence that meant something. The kind that didn't need to be filled. Then Cal said, You don't have to fight alone anymore. Valari looked at him, heart pounding. What do you mean? He stood up and placed another log into the fire. I mean, you can stay here as long as you need. I've got food, medicine, heat. Now I've got company. Valerie lowered her head. She wasn't used to kindness that came with no demand, no price, no debt, no hidden reason, she whispered. Why are you so different? Cal smiled softly. Maybe I'm not, he said. Maybe I just know what it's like to need someone and have no one. Valari stared into the fire, the flames dancing in her tired eyes. For the first time in a long time, her body relaxed. Her hand reached toward the fire, not to burn this time, but to feel warmth. She leaned back against the wall, holding her child, and somewhere deep inside, a new thought formed. Maybe. Just maybe. They weren't alone anymore. The fire inside the shelter burned brighter that morning. Cal had added more dry wood, and the smell of warm broth filled the air outside. The wind still roared across the snow-covered hills, but inside, the world felt different, calmer, safer, almost like a home. Ciro woke with more color in his cheeks. He stretched his arms, then reached for his mother. Valari smiled, brushing his messy hair gently. You feel warmer today, she whispered. I dreamed about the sun, Ciro said. It was yellow and soft, like your voice. Valari held him tightly, hiding the tears that formed in her eyes. Beside them, Cal checked his small med scanner. Frowning slightly, he's better, Cal said, but the fever's still rising at night. Valari looked at him with worry. What does he need? She asked. There's a plant, Cal said. It grows far down the ridge under frozen rocks. Locals call it heat moss. It works like natural medicine. It could help his fever break. Her eyes widened. That place is dangerous, she said. There are caves, ice cracks, wild things. Cal nodded, slipping on his coat. I know. But he won't last much longer without it. I'll go. I've climbed worse places. Valari grabbed his arm before he could reach the door. You've done enough, she said. You already saved us. You don't have to risk yourself. Again, Cal looked at her, calm and steady. I do, he replied. Because I said I would protect him, and you. She stared into his eyes, confused, touched, afraid. I don't understand you, she whispered. I don't either. He replied with a small smile, but I'm going anyway. He left the shelter and stepped into the cold. The wind hit him hard, but he kept walking. Valari stood at the doorway, watching him disappear into the white fog. Then she turned and looked at her son, who was breathing slowly in his sleep. Every hour that passed, she stared at the door, waiting, hoping, fearing. The hours felt like years. Valari wrapped Ciro in every blanket she could find. She made soup, sang old songs in a broken voice, and whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep, but Cal didn't return. Night fell again, cold and sharp. The fire started to fade, and Valari's heart sank. She put another log in, but her hands were shaking. The storm outside screamed like a beast, and snow piled against the door. She stood there for a long time, staring into the fire. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She prayed not to a god, but to the universe. To anyone who could bring Cal back. A sound broke the silence. Footsteps, slow and heavy. The door creaked open, and Cal stumbled in, His coat was torn, his face bleeding, arms full of frozen roots and glowing moss. Valari gasped and rushed to him, catching him before he fell. "You came back," she said, voice cracking. "Of course I did," Cal muttered. "Told you I would." He dropped the moss on the floor. Coughing hard, she pulled him close, guiding him to the warm corner. Sierra opened his eyes and whispered, "Cal." Cal smiled weakly. "Hey, buddy." Valari wasted no time. She took the moss and boiled it quickly. The liquid turned green. With steam that smelled of medicine and life, she fed it to her son slowly, carefully, every drop full of hope. Sierra relaxed. Soon after, the fever beginning to drop, Valari touched his forehead and felt it cooler than before. Her breath caught in her throat. She looked at Cal and whispered, "It's working." He leaned back against the wall, bruised but smiling. "Told you it would," he said. Valari walked over and knelt beside him. His hands were frostbitten. His lips cracked, his eyes red. She took his hands in hers and began to clean them with soft cloth and warm water. "You didn't have to do this," she said softly. "I know," Cal replied, "but I wanted to." "Why?" she asked. He looked at her and said, "Because when I saw you and your son by that fire, I saw myself, alone, scared and cold. I couldn't let you stay that way." Valari looked at him, heart heavy and full. She didn't know what to call the feeling growing inside her. Gratitude, respect, something more. "You gave us warmth," she said, "but now you've given us life." They sat together, quiet, listening to the fire crackle, and the child breathed softly. Outside, the storm began to fade, but inside, a different fire had started to burn, one not made of wood or flame. It was made of trust, sacrifice, and something stronger than survival. Something like the start of a bond that could never be broken. Morning came, but it did not bring peace. The storm had calmed. The sky was gray and quiet. Inside the small shelter, warmth still danced in the air. Sierra's breathing was steady, his fever finally broken. Valari sat close to him, whispering soft songs from her home. Cal was resting too, his wounds wrapped, his body tired but alive. He had risked everything to find the healing moss. And now her child lived because of him. Valari didn't know what she felt anymore. But whatever it was strong and deep. Then it happened. A sharp sound echoed from outside, a buzzing like broken metal wings. Cal opened his eyes, listening carefully. Valari froze, her hand tightening around Sarah. "What is that?" she asked in a whisper. Cal stood and moved to the door. Peeking through a small crack, he saw it. Flying low near the edge of the ridge, a tracking drone, sleek, black, and watching. His heart sank. "Someone's found us," he said. "Valaris?" Face went pale. "They're looking for me," she said, voice shaking. They must have picked up my old signal when I burned the emergency tag." She stood up fast, panic in her eyes. "They're coming? Who?" Cal asked firmly. "Who's coming for you?" "My people," she whispered. "The ones who banished me. They called me unfit when I refused to give up Sarah. They said we were weak, not worth saving. They'll take him. Or kill him." Cal's jaw tightened. "No," he said. "They won't." Valari looked at him, desperate. "I can't run again, Cal. I won't leave him behind." "You won't have to," he said, stepping toward his gear. "I'm not letting anyone take either of you." He pulled out a small case, opened it, and revealed old tools, metal clamps, wires, energy cells. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make traps, signals, and walls of light. "You know how to fight?" she asked, surprised. Cal nodded. "I wasn't always a botanist. Before plants, I survived wars too." He handed Valari a stun baton and showed her how to activate it. She held it tightly, still trembling but willing. Together, they began to prepare the shelter. Cal set up trip lines around the outside. He buried charge wires in the snow, connected to a signal breaker. He used ice and scrap to hide the traps. Knowing the drone would report their location, Valari stood near the entrance. Her child behind her, weapon in hand. She looked at Cal and asked, "Why are you doing all this?" He looked at her, steady and calm, because no one should have to fight alone. A few hours passed, then a low rumble echoed through the mountains. A black transport ship appeared in the sky, flying slow and heavy. It landed not far from the shelter, melting snow in every direction. 3 figures stepped out tall, armored and cruel-faced. One of them held a scan device. Watching the trail of the drone, another held shock cuffs and a binding chain. "They're close," one of them said. "She can't have gone far, not with the child, inside the shelter." Cal placed himself near the entrance, crouched low. Valari stood behind him, her heart racing. Sira held her leg, hiding under the blanket. "They won't leave without a fight," she said. Cal nodded. "Then we give them one." The first enemy stepped on the trip line, and a shockwave knocked him down. The second charged forward, only to fall into a pit filled with flash grenades. The third made it past Tangri, fast and ready. He burst into the shelter, aiming a stun gun. But Valari didn't hesitate. She screamed and rushed him, swinging the baton. The weapon cracked against his helmet, sending sparks into the air. He grabbed her by the arm, trying to throw her aside, but Cal tackled him from behind, slamming him into the wall. The enemy swung wildly, hitting Cal hard in the ribs. But Valari struck again, screaming, protecting her child. Together, they brought him down. He fell unconscious. Buried in snow and broken tech, silence returned, sharp and cold. Valari dropped the baton and ran to her son. He was safe, eyes wide but unhurt. Cal stood slowly, bruised and breathing hard. Valari looked at him, his face cut, his hands bleeding, but he was still standing. "They came for me," she whispered. "But you stood with me," he nodded, wiping blood from his lip. "And I always will." The wind returned. Colder than before, snowflakes flew like sharp glass in the air. But the real storm had already passed inside the shelter, in their hearts. Valari held her son close. Trembling, the invaders were gone. 3 armored enforcers, now unconscious or trapped in the snow. Cal sat on a metal crate, holding his side. Breathing heavily, blood soaked through his shirt, dark and deep. "You're hurt," Valari said, rushing to him. Cal shook his head slowly. "I've had worse," he muttered, trying to smile, but when he stood, his legs buckled. And he almost fell. Valari caught him, wrapping his arm over her shoulders. "You fought for us," she whispered. "Let me fight for you now." She helped him lie down near the fire. With water and clean cloth, she washed the wound. Her fingers were gentle, her hands steady, but her heart was full of fear. "I need to close this," she said, "or you'll bleed too much." Cal grunted. "Do it." Valari heated a small blade over the fire until it glowed. She took a deep breath, then pressed it against the wound. Cal clenched his jaw, muscles tight, but he didn't scream, not once. Sira watched silently from the side, eyes wide with worry. He had never seen pain like this, never seen someone bleed for them. Not even his own people had done that. When it was over, Valari wrapped Cal's side and sat beside him. She didn't speak, just placed her hand on his chest. His heartbeat was weak but steady. Hours passed slowly, the snow outside piling up again. The bodies of the attackers were buried, their weapons taken. Valari used their tools to block the entrance, make it safer, but she knew more would come. If the first group didn't return, others would follow. Her people were not known for mercy. She looked at her child, then at Cal. Sleeping quietly with bandages across his ribs, she whispered to herself, "I can't let them take this away." She stepped outside, alone, into the white silence. Snow covered the mountains, and the sky above was dull and gray. She walked carefully, far enough from the shelter, but not too far to lose it. Then she raised one of the enemy's signal beacons and changed its code. She sent a false signal, a message saying the target was lost, the trail cold. Then she smashed the beacon with a rock and let the snow bury it. When she returned to the shelter, Cal was awake. He looked at her, confused. "What did you do?" "I told them I'm gone," she said. "For now, they'll stop looking." "You risked everything," he said. "I learned it from you," Valari answered softly. Later that night, Cal sat near the fire, moving slowly. Valari brought him soup, kneeling beside him. "You shouldn't be up," she said. "I've got to keep my strength." He replied, "In case they come again." She looked at him for a long time, then said something she had never told anyone. "When they cast me out, I was alone. My own brother turned his back on me." He said a child like Sira was a weakness. I knew then that I would never belong again. Cal looked at her, his face calm, but his eyes burning. "You belong here," he said. "With him?" He nodded at Sarah. "And with me." Valari's breath caught. No one had ever said those words to her before. She felt her body tremble, not from cold, but from something deeper, something warm and scary and beautiful. Sira ran to her and hugged her tightly. "I don't want to leave," he said. Valari held him close, then looked at Cal. "We're not leaving," she whispered. The snow outside continued to fall, but inside, the shelter had become something more. Not just a place to survive, but a place to live, to heal, to protect, to start again. Cal rested his head against the wall. "You know," he said with a weak grin, "this might be the weirdest family I've ever been part of." Valari smiled for the first time in days. "Maybe the strongest too," she replied. They sat there, watching the fire. A human, an alien. Mother and her child, not just survivors anymore, but something more. A family built not by blood, but by sacrifice, trust, and fire in the snow. The snow stopped falling. For the first time in many days, the sky cleared. Soft morning light touched the white hills with gold. Inside the small shelter, warmth still lived, not just from fire, but from hearts healing together. Sira was the first awake. He stretched his arms and blinked up at the ceiling, then quietly crawled between his mother and Cal. He looked at the human man, still sleeping beside the fire, and whispered, "Is he still here?" Valari opened her eyes and smiled. "Yes," she said softly. He didn't leave. She sat up slowly, her body sore but whole. She ran her fingers through Sira's hair and looked around the shelter. It was still just walls and metal, broken tech and repurposed tools. But now it felt different. It felt like home. Cal groaned quietly and sat up, holding his side, still breathing. He muttered, "So that's good?" Valari chuckled for the first time in weeks. "You should be resting," she said. "I've been resting," he replied. "Now I want breakfast." They shared the last of the moss soup, then took inventory of what supplies were left. They still had some dry food, basic medicine, and one working heater. It wasn't much, but it was enough for now. Later that day, Valari began sewing together scraps of cloth, using pieces from Cal's damaged coats and what she found on the fallen attackers. She made a small tunic for Sarah and stitched together a warmer shirt. For herself, her fingers moved with care, weaving not just thread, but memory. "I used to sew festival robes," she said. "Now I make armor out of rags." "You're still an artist," Cal said from the corner. "Repairing a broken tool, maybe even more now." Sira ran outside for a few minutes, laughing, chasing the wind. His feet kicked through the snow, and his voice echoed like music through the hills. Valari stood at the doorway, watching him with wonder. "I never thought I'd see him play again," she whispered. Cal came up beside her, leaning on his walking stick. "He's got your spirit," he said, "and he has yours," she replied as the sun climbed higher. Cal took a small device from a box message recorder. "I need to send out one last signal," he said. "Let Earth know I'm alive, and that I found something worth staying for." Valari's smile faded slightly. "You're going back?" she asked, her voice quiet. Cal looked at her and paused, then shook his head. "No," he said. "I'm just letting them know not to wait. For me, this is where I belong now." Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away. "You really mean that?" "K2," he said. "I came here looking for plants, but I found a child who laughs in the snow, a mother who would burn herself to keep him warm, and a reason to fight again." Valari stepped closer, unsure at first. Then she reached out and took his hand. It was rough, scarred, but steady. Like everything he had given to them, that night, Sierra crawled onto Cal's lap while they sat near the fire. The boy looked up at him with wide eyes and asked, "Can I call you something?" Cal smiled. "What do you want to call me?" Sierra thought for a moment, then whispered, "Papa." Valari froze. Her breath caught in her chest. Cal looked at her. Searching her face, she didn't speak. She only nodded once, eyes full of quiet tears. Cal wrapped his arms around Sierra gently. "I'd be honored," he said. The fire crackled beside them. But now there was another fire inside each of them, one built from trust, from pain, from survival. And now, from something deeper, family. Outside the shelter, a small star blinked. In the sky, a passing drone. Too far to hear, too far to see clearly. But Valari saw it, and she did not fear. She stood tall at the doorway. Holding her child's hand, Cal stood beside her, one arm resting across her back. If the world came for them again, they would be ready. But for now, there was peace. There was warmth, there was love, and in a world that once tried to bury them in snow, they had lit a fire that could never be put out. Together, they were no longer lost. They were home.